in the book of Ecclesiastes. We're in the third chapter already, believe it or not. So we're moving right along. True or false? The book of Ecclesiastes is a big experiment by Solomon. True. And his very purpose is to figure out what? Yes, what is the purpose of life? A life without God is, how does Solomon describe it? Vanity and vexation of spirit. Okay? If this life is all there is, even though there's a lot to do, it's just empty, isn't it? Because what happens to us? Yeah, we eventually just die. And if that's all there is to life, then there's not that much to life, is there? And so I find it interesting that Solomon started the first two chapters talking about that experiment. And then we get to chapter 3 and all of a sudden he kind of changes his thought process, doesn't he? And he says there is a time for every season under heaven, right? And I think what happened to Solomon was this. As he was out in the world and as he was doing all this experimenting, looking at wisdom, looking at labor, looking at pleasure, all of a sudden he says, you know, there are some things that are very common that happen to what? All men. Okay? If you live long enough, you're going to experience everything that he talks about in these 13 different contrasts. 26 different things, times in life that all of us are eventually going to reach and have to experience. And he says that every one of them serves a purpose. There's a purpose to every one of these. And that's what we need to remember. Okay, we're going to experience. Is it good to know what you're going to experience? Sometimes it is, isn't it? Okay, it's just good to know that. And we'd be wise as parents to sit down with our children and to go through these particular verses and let them know, hey guys, there's going to come a time in your life where you're going to go through every one of these things. And that way they're not shocked about it. They understand why. They understand there's a purpose to it. And they can appreciate the things, even the things that are negative in nature, can't they? And so very, very wise to do that. We're in Ecclesiastes 3 verse 6 and he says this, a time to get and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to get. Some translations do not translate the word as get. They translate it as a time to seek. A time to seek and a time to lose. Okay? I just wrote down some examples down there. When a couple gets married, there comes a time when it's time to get a house. Isn't there? They get sick of renting. They get sick of mom and dad, whatever it is. And there's just a time to buy a house. There's also a time to get a better car. No, I didn't say a new car necessarily. But there comes a time to get a better car. There's a time to get a better job. There's a time to get advice from another person. You see, there's a time to what? There's a time to get. And do those times come along pretty often? Seem like they do, don't they? Time to get comes along pretty often. But notice that he also says there's a time to what? A time to lose. You ever seen a mom look at her 4-year-old kid and say, it's time to lose that pacifier? You know? And you who are at the store hearing that think, why didn't he lose that thing about 3 years ago? You know? Unbelievable. And the kid looks at mom like he's just heartbroken, doesn't he? You know, I don't want to lose my pacifier. I carried around a little blanket for the longest time. I just attached that little blanket. I don't ever know what happened to it, but it was time to lose it somewhere. And that joker is gone. I have no clue where it is. Does there come a time to lose weight? Oh yeah, there comes a time when it's time to lose, isn't it? You know, you can't button your breeches. It's either what? Go buy you a new wardrobe or it's time to lose, isn't it? And that's not an easy one either. Are there times to lose a friend? I heard one, yeah. See, we don't like to say that, do we? Now, sometimes when you become a Christian, it's time to lose some friends. Did you know that? Because those friends are what? They're evil, they're wicked, they have a bad influence on your life. And the Bible tells us that evil companions what? Corrupt good morals, corrupt good manners. And so there's some times that it's time just to cut off a friend. And that's not an easy one to do. So there are times to keep and there's times to lose. And notice this, a time to get. Notice this next one. There's a time to keep and there's a time to cast away. There's a time to keep. There's a time to keep a car and there's time to cast away a car. Isn't there? Now my daddy, he believed in buying a car and keeping a car till it just died. Okay? That was just his mindset. He'd keep a car 10, 12, 14 years and until that joker was just, ragged out. But there always came a time that it was what? Time to cast it away. Time to get rid of it. How do you like this next one? There's a time to keep leftovers. And there's a time to what? Cast away leftovers. A fourth day is too much. Okay? I'm sick of cold chicken. I'm sick of cold pizza. Whatever it is, it's time to cast that joker away. Now, Mary Lou, she don't eat leftovers. It's always time to cast them away. You're going to have about 10 people at your back door with bags just waiting on you. There's a time to keep a subscription and a time to cast away a subscription, isn't there? There's a time to keep time. I love that. And there's a time to cast away time. Isn't there? Somebody says, what you talking about, preacher? Okay. What you talking about, Willis? That always used to just tickle me to death. What you talking about, Willis? What do I mean? There's a time to keep time, isn't there? Is that true? Oh yeah. Folks, let me tell you what. You go to your job and guess what? They keeping time, aren't they? And they watching you punch the clock. I remember one time I worked at Federal Express and we had to punch that clock at 11:30 at night. Well, the parking lot was about 2 miles from the place where I worked. That's how big Federal Express was. And you always catch a bus. Man, I pulled up late one day and guess what I saw? The bus leaving. Well, I knew it was going to be about 7 minutes, 8 minutes before that bus ever got back to pick me up. So Vic thought, it's time to what? It's time to run. Man, I ran. I ran so hard. I get in there and I stick that time card under there. And just as I'm about to punch that card, that clock goes clink, 11:31. You got to be kidding me. I should have just caught the bus. 11:31. Well, the reason I know that there's a time to count time is for the next 2 pay periods, I lost raises because I was a minute late to work. Okay? When it came time for my review, they always brought it up. Okay? Now, I understood the first time. Hey, you were late. We're going to deduct you a quarter on your pay raise. Oh, you got to be kidding me. But the second time, this kid almost went crazy. Are you kidding? 2 different pay periods you're going to deduct. Yep. Don't get a dime this time. Man, 35 cents lost because I missed a minute. Yeah, there's a time to count time. Do we count time in races? Yeah. Even just 100th, 1,000th of a tick means a lot, doesn't it? But there's a time to lose time. I don't know about you. The only time I ever sleep in is on vacation. You know that? I'm up every morning when I hear Kathleen get up. It's about 5:20 every morning, okay? Except Sunday mornings. They're a little earlier, but 5:20. Except when? On vacation. And guess what I do on vacation? I don't count time. See, there's a time what? Not to count time. I don't even worry about it anymore. Get up at 7, 7:30, 8. Boy, I'm getting lazy, aren't I? Getting up that late in the day. Goodness gracious. But there's a time not to count time for certain. How about this one? There's a time to keep books and there's a time to what? Cast away books. My time's coming. When I can't get all my books in the biggest U-Haul trailer, it's time to what? Cast away some books. Okay? I guarantee you when I die, there'll be some casting away. Because my kids aren't going to do anything with them things except cast them away. Guarantee it. There's a time to keep clothing and there's a time to cast away clothing, isn't there? Okay? Now notice the note though. Sometimes we cast away things we should have kept, don't we? My mother had a yard sale, and I had just a small box, probably of about 200 baseball cards. And I'm talking about 200 baseball cards that were purchased back in the early 60s, mid-60s. And those players went way back into the 30s and 40s, some of them. And she had that little box of cards out there all day. And I should have just picked them up and set them aside, and I didn't. Nobody bought any of them. Well, I left, and I came back home. My mom said, boy, there's a man came by here, and guess what he did? He gave me $100 just to take it all. I guarantee you there's some valuable baseball cards in that little stack. Okay? It weren't time to cast it away, but Mama said, let her go. Unbelievable. Sometimes we throw away tax documents that we need, don't we? Or at least we wish we had because we could have gotten a deduction for that. But I don't have it. Okay? You ever cast away a picture you wished you had? My mom had our box of school annuals, you know, and there must have been, 5 or 6 of them, just the old annuals. And she came to us one day, you kids want these annuals? You know, I was in my early 20s. I don't want them nasty annuals. Good grief, I just got out of all that stuff. So guess what Mama does? Gone, cast them away. Now I wished I had my school annuals. Okay? Look up and see who you went to school with. You can't remember when you get past 30. You ever cast away instructions to something? Now that ain't good. I don't need his instructions. That's what a man says. I don't need his instructions. I know how to do it. Until you can't. And then you throw it away, and guess what? You wish you had your instructions, don't you? There's a time when you don't cast away things. But notice this next one. Yeah, thank the Lord for YouTube, yes. But folks, sometimes we keep things that we should have cast away, don't we? It's easy to do that too. Newspapers, magazines, boxes, paint, old electronics. Everybody have a drawer full of old electronics? You know? No? She casts hers away. Psst, we got a whole drawer full of that mess. Okay? And paint. People, you walk into garages. Man, one wall, paint. What's that from? 1935. We painted the bathroom red. You know, are you kidding me? Good grief. Beverly? Do you really? Be time to keep. That's it, huh? But it is. There are people who hoard cards, don't they? I mean, they keep them forever. And it's just crazy. The things that we keep and the things we tear away. But Solomon says what? There's a time to what? There's a time to keep, and there's a time to cast away. What's interesting is he doesn't define what? What to keep and what to throw away. He leaves that to what? Each individual, because each individual is different when it comes to those things. And who am I to criticize Beverly for keeping all of Bill's cards? Okay? Every card Bill's ever given me, gone in the trash. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Notice Ecclesiastes 3:7. A time to rend and a time to what? Sow. A time to keep silence and a time to what? A time to speak. Uh-oh. He's just about to get to meddling. Okay? A time to rend. You know, when I was growing up, things were a whole lot different as far as money is concerned and the attitude people had toward money. And, you know, my mom, she would buy us clothes maybe twice a year, you know. And she'd buy them from Sears, and they'd come in, you know, in a big box or whatever. She'd go by Sears and pick up her box, whatever it was, and she'd bring them back. Well, I was kind of a heavy kid, and so I had to have pants that were too long because, you know, when you get the waist big enough, then the pants are too long. So guess what you had to do? Had to hem your britches, right? So she'd hem my britches, and that was a time to what? That was a time to sew. Well, after about 3 months, Vic was growing taller. Not much taller. Okay? I didn't say how tall. Okay? But I'd grow a little bit taller. Well, guess what it was time to do? No, not buy new breeches. It's time to rend. You see, she curled up about 25 inches. And she let out a little bit more, was she not? Time to rend. And she let out those hems. So it was a time to rend when Vic finally, son, you grown up just a little bit. Unbelievable. Wow. There comes a time when clothes can no longer be worn. Used to, when clothes got old, what did you do with them? Either hand them down, give them to somebody else, or you tear them up and use them as rags, wouldn't you? My dad had a lot of shirts and different things out in his garage that he used to wear, but there came time to what? Came time to rend those things. Okay? Just no good any longer. When someone is hurt in the wilderness, guys, you don't carry around a bunch of bandages and stuff. You may have a few, but guess what? That's time to what? It's time to rend. Sometimes you have to rend just to get to the hurt, don't you? Or you have to take off something in order to make a bandage on an individual. It's time to rend. Notice this statement. And David said to Joab and to all the people that were with him, rend your clothes and gird you with sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And King David himself followed the bier. It's time to what? It's time to rend. We don't do that today, do we? When we get news of a death, we don't rip our clothes, do we? But it was a form of grief and a form of sorrow, especially in Old Testament times when they got bad news, when they heard of death. And this is Abner's death. And notice what David said. He says what? Rend your clothes. Okay? They grab their clothes and they just rip their clothes to show how much grief and agony that they were experiencing. So there's a time to rend. But notice there's also a time to what? A time to sew. Remember those breeches I was telling you about? My mom didn't buy just regular breeches, okay? She bought breeches with reinforced knees, right? Y'all remember those? Well, I was so short that I didn't have knee pads, I had shin guards. Okay, that's how short I was. I'm serious, my knee pads were down here, they weren't at my knees. So guess what still happened? I still ripped my knees. Right? Well, you don't go buy a new pair of breeches just because your knees rip out. What do? You sew a patch on it, don't you? I was the most patched up kid in school. Okay? It was unbelievable, but it was a time to sew. You know, my mom didn't say, oh, we'll get you some more pants. Oh, no. You know, the only thing I'd do, I'd walk in and say, hey, Mom, we need another patch. Okay? I knew what she was going to do. And sometimes they were the iron-ons. Y'all remember those? That weren't good. Okay? Unbelievable. There was a time when mothers sewed almost all the clothes of their children, didn't they? Man, they knew. You know, harvest come along, get a little money. It's time to what? Time to sew, wasn't it? Winter's coming, time to sew. Spring comes, it's time to sew because I got to get my kids all decked out. We don't have those kind of times as much as we used to. But Solomon also says there's a time to keep silent and there's a time to what? A time to speak. A time to keep silent. Notice some points down there I wrote. we do not always have to open our mouth and say something. Okay? We don't have to. God gave you 2 lips and a set of teeth in front of your tongue to trap that baby in. Okay? That's what those things are for. You don't have to let that tongue go. How about this next one? We must learn that silence does not necessarily mean agreement. Just because I let you say something and I don't say something back does not mean that I what? I agree with you. I'm just not going to what? Argue with you. You come in here and tell me that the carpet's green, I'm not going to argue with you. You can be stupid all day long. But I am not going to argue with you about the color because does it matter? It doesn't matter. And just because I don't argue with you about the color of the carpet doesn't mean that I agree with you that it's what? Green. I know it's blue. Notice this next one. Words can sometimes make situations worse rather than making them better, can't they? Listen to this passage from Proverbs 26:4. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like him. Guess what he just said? Be quiet. Don't answer a fool according to his folly. Because it could be that you look just as bad or worse than the who? Than the fool. There's a time to be what? Silent. Question. Did Jesus believe there were times to be silent? Oh, yes. During the course of His trials, there were at least 3 major occasions when He was silent. Did y'all know that? The first time was in front of a high priest. Matthew 26:62 and 63. And the high priest said unto Him, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witness against thee? But Jesus held His peace. And the high priest said unto Him, I adjure thee by the living God, that thou tell us whether thou be Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus just what? He just held His tongue. He was led as a sheep to the slaughter and as a lamb dumb before her shearers. He didn't what? He didn't always speak. Pontius Pilate. And when he was accused of the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then said Pilate unto him, Hearest thou not how many things they witness against thee? And he answered him to never a word, insomuch that the governor marveled what? Greatly. There's a time to what? Just be quiet. Before Herod. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see of him a long season, because he had heard many things of him. And he hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. Then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. And don't you know Pilate was disappointed? He desired to see him what? A long time. And finally, this Jesus is before me. Notice what it says too. It says that he said what to him? Then he questioned him with many words. Do politicians and people in power and rulers and judges, and do they know how to question people? Oh, let me tell you, folks. They will rag the stink out of you. If you've never sat in testimony on in a courtroom, it is the most uncomfortable thing that you could possibly imagine. Okay? They make you doubt anything that you believe. You know it? And the way they word things, you know what they want you to answer. Okay? And you know that's not the answer that you really want to give, but guess what? That sounds like the answer you ought to give. But if you give that answer, it's over. Sometimes it's better just to what? Just to hush. There was a great-grandmother who desired she wanted custody of her great-grandchildren that she had put in the care of children's home. Well, we didn't think it was wise for these two children. One of them was like 6 and the other one was 3. And they were wildcats. I mean, it was something else. And this grandmother was like 80 years old. She brought them into our care because she couldn't take care of them. What she didn't think about, however, is that when she put them in our care, guess what she lost? She lost the state funding for the children. Well, she'd become reliant on the state funding. So, after just a few months, the very next thing she wants is what? I need them kids back. I can take care of them kids. No, you can't. Okay, we were struggling with them, much less what she would do at her age. And so we have to go to court, don't we? And I have to take the witness stand because I'm one of those kids' caseworkers. And first question out of the lawyer's mouth was this: are you telling me you think this grandma doesn't love her great-grandchild? You see, I didn't want to give the child back. You know? So he's making it sound like what? Like I'm accusing her of not loving the child. So how do you answer that? You know? You have to be very careful what you say back to that man, because the next statement, he knows exactly what he's going to do if you answer a certain way. It ain't pretty. Okay? It's very difficult. And so, you know, sometimes it's better just to what? Just to be quiet. Don't have to say anything. But notice, secondly, there is also a time to what? There is a time to speak. Remember a while ago we read Proverbs 26:4? Answer thou not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. The very next verse says this: answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceits. Uh-oh. There's sometimes I'm supposed to be what? Silent when it comes to a fool. There's other times when I'm supposed to speak when it comes to a fool. Man, it's tough, isn't it? We go back to John, the 19th chapter, and listen to this. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was more afraid. The Jews had told him that this is the King of the Jews. So when he heard that saying, he was afraid. And went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Uh-oh. Jesus did what? He was silent. Then saith Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not I have power to crucify thee, and have power to release thee? Jesus answered, uh-oh, now it's time to what? Now it's time to speak. First question, he remains silent. Second question, he speaks. Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater power, or the greater sin. I'm sorry, that should be sin right there, guys. Change that word. Unbelievable, isn't it? Notice the lessons. The main problem that we have is choosing when to be silent and when to what? When to speak. How do we know? Right? Unbelievable. If we speak and we shouldn't have, we regret it, right? You know, we get away from the situation and we sit there and say, you know, I should have said something, right? But then there's also times when we speak and when we get away from the situation, we wish we hadn't. And we tell ourselves, why did I say that? So you see, it's hard to know when to keep silent and when to speak, isn't it? So guess what most of us do? I'm not going to say what most of us do. Okay? It depends on who we are, isn't it? You know? There's sometimes we need to speak, especially in religious conversations, and we just shut up. Don't we? That's common today. I'm not going to speak the truth to you. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. I'm not going to show the Bible to you to show you that you're in error. I'm just going to what? Shut up and let you believe whatever you want to believe. There's times when we need to speak, don't we? Because they need to hear the what? They need to hear the truth. And if we don't tell them the truth, then they may never ever hear the truth again. We may be the only person who ever told them, right? But we've also been in those situations when we shouldn't have said a word, and we just became like a volcano, and lava just comes spewing out of us. And we think, I wish I'd just kept silent. Man. Notice point number 2, whether we speak or remain silent, we have to learn to live with the consequences, don't we? It's not easy. That'd be a good lesson, wouldn't it? When to speak and when not to speak. I don't know if we have all the answers to that question. You know that? I just don't know that we do. That'd be a toughie. All right. Ecclesiastes 3:8. A time to love and a time to what? Hate. A time of war and a time of what? Peace. Man. A time to love and a time to hate. There is a time to love, folks. You know that? There are times that arise in our lives when the display of love is absolutely essential. And sometimes we don't want to do it. You know that? A woman walks in and she begins to wash the feet of Jesus. She breaks an alabaster box, and that alabaster box contains costly ointment, doesn't it? And individuals are standing around and they see what she's doing and they see what she's anointing the feet of Jesus with, and they say, "My, that cost a lot of money." And they immediately begin to what? Criticize. What a waste! Down on old Jesus' dirty feet. That money could have been what? Sold and used to help the poor. That old woman just out here wasting that stuff. For them, it was a time to what? It was a time to hate. You know what? Not for Jesus. Jesus, it was a time to what? It was a time to love. She commended that woman, didn't she? And she rebuked those individuals. And she even said that this would be a testament unto her throughout all of this age. And folks, we're still speaking about her 2,000 years today, aren't we? See, Jesus did what? Jesus loved the woman for what she did. There's others who looked at it as a time to hate the woman for what she had done. On the cross of Calvary, did Jesus have every reason to hate? As far as we're concerned, He did. I've been taken by my own people and arrested. I've been charged falsely and not according to the evidence. I'm an innocent man, and I've been proclaimed guilty. I've been taken through at least 6 trials tonight, and not one of these trials it was supposed to have happened. Every one of them have been illegal trials. I have been beaten, I have been scourged, and now I've been crucified for absolutely nothing. And even the person who condemned me said I was a just man. He had every reason to what? Hate. And his first words on the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He loved, didn't he? It's not easy to do by any means. There's a time to love. But notice what he says. There is a time to hate. If you weren't here Wednesday night, you missed a good lesson about this during the invitation. Okay, Mike talked about time to hate. And the Bible talks about times to hate, doesn't it? Notice point number 1. At no time should we ever love things that are sinful and in opposition to God. Never. The Bible says this, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Isn't that something? If I don't hate evil, then guess what I don't do? I don't fear God. I don't respect God. I don't reverence God. I don't honor God. If I don't hate evil, then guess what? I don't truly fear God. The fear of the Lord is to what? Hate evil. Amos says in Amos 5:15, hate the evil and what? Love the good. Hate the evil and love the good. Lesson. The world is trying to get us to love things today that are just as evil as they possibly can be, folks. You know that? All this gender rot that's going on today, we better be careful. We better be careful. It began with urging us to tolerate the evil, right? Tolerate it. They can't help it. They were born that way. We need to tolerate them. We even changed the whole DSM-4. Did you know that? As far as the diagnosis of these individuals and how to treat them. Changed the whole diagnostic and statistical manual in order to cater to these individuals. It's just unbelievable. They still classify them as a disorder, but it's how we treat them now, right? The second thing they want us to do is this. Now we're told that we have to what? Accept the evil. You don't just tolerate it, you have to accept the evil. If you're a man and want me to call you a woman, then you got to call me a woman. You got to lie to me because I want you to. Unbelievable. Absolutely. There's times to hate, isn't there? Notice point C there. We are threatened with punishment if we do not speak out against if we do speak out against evil, aren't we? You'll be censored. You'll be fined. You'll be put in prison. You see, we're going to get you to do what? We're going to get you either on our side or do away with you. One of the two. They will try to use our Christianity against us if we display a hatred for evil, won't they? Here's what they'll say. Aren't you supposed to love? Well, you're sure not being very loving. See, they don't understand what? They don't understand love. And that's the society that we're in today, folks. And we as Christians, we have to be very careful, don't we? How we display ourselves and how we conduct ourselves in a society that wants us to accept evil. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Oh.
I wasn't expecting her to be so dismissive of me, especially, that's when you grow, that's when managers grow,
Right.
and I'll never forget just how it
Yep. See, they're going. You're going to accept this. You're going to participate in this, and you're going to like it, whether you like it or not. We're having that very problem now, are we not, with the girl swimmers? Okay. I heard the other day that what's that? Leah is her name? Leah Kyle. trans woman was racing against a girl, and two things happened. They tied. But how did it go? Forget. They were both in the final heat, and they both tied. Okay, the girl did tie, and they had a trophy. And they told the girl very plainly that Leah's going to take the trophy home. We'll send you yours in the mail. Okay, and so they were going to give precedence to the trans person over the girl who was just as successful as was he. And then in the locker room, he exposed himself to all the girl swimmers that were in there, And I don't know about you, I don't want that for my kids, okay? And, it's we're living in a crazy world. Oh, yes. It is amazing. Notice the next one. There's a time of war and a time of peace. Now, I want you to listen to something. There is a time of war. Did you hear what he didn't say? He didn't say there is a time to what? Make war. It should never be our desire to make war with anybody. You know that? That should not be our desire. The Bible teaches us to seek peace with all men. Romans 12, verse 18. However, there are times when war is warranted, isn't it? On our webpage, I've been doing daily devotionals on the book of Deuteronomy. And in Deuteronomy chapter 2, Moses is recounting their approach to the land of Canaan. Okay, it's about time to enter the land of Canaan, and they're making an approach to the land of Canaan. Well, they have to pass through several enemy territories in order to get there. Okay, and one of them was a king by the name of Sihon. Okay, king of Bashan. King of the Amorites. And he said, the things that he says is this: we approached him with peace. And the peace was this: we need to come through your land. We're not going to hurt anything. And all the food and all the water that we use, we'll pay you for it. Sound like a pretty good deal? Not going to hurt anything. We'll pay you for anything we use. Guess what? Sihon refused. The Bible says that Sihon came out to fight against Israel. Well, guess what God did? God fought back. There's a time for what? There's a time for war. If your enemies don't want to be at peace with you, and if they want to fight against you, then guess what? It's time for war. And God never told Israel not to be ready for war, okay? Because He knew what? There'll always be a time for war. Okay, there'll always be a time when an enemy will try to rise up against you and oppress you. And guess what? There's a time for war. But notice he also says there's a time for what? There's a time for peace. From time to time in our lives, there are peace, isn't there? And you want to know what Paul says we need to pray for? What does he say to pray for? I find it interesting. He doesn't say to pray for peace. Turn over to 1 Timothy. And somebody read verses 1 and 2. I didn't put them in here. I put them in the notes, but I didn't write them out. Who's got it? 1 Timothy chapter 2, 1 and 2. Isn't that something? He says, I need you to do what? I need you to pray. And I need you to pray for men. And I especially need you to pray for kings and for what? All that are in authority. I need you to pray for your rulers, folks. It's the rulers who make the decisions as to whether we get in war or not, isn't it? He says, I need you to pray for them that we may lead a what? Quiet and peaceful life in all godliness. You see, We need to pray for our rulers because they're the ones who are making the decisions. And we want what? We want peace, don't we? All righty, we got through that section. We will enter into the next section next time.